think the biggest and greatest thing Doc does for me, he just allows me to take off that cape. I don't have to be that superhero anymore.
Someone cares about you.
There's a reason why your heart is beating.
You still have a purpose.
Don't give up.
It's important to know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Today's guest is David Crenshaw, an Army veteran and ambassador for Canines for Warriors. After his time in the military, David continued his career in law enforcement and began noticing signs of PTSD. He turned to Canines for Warriors and was matched with his service dog, Doc. In this episode, we talk about his experience during boot camp when 9/11 occurred, the relationship he has with his service dog, and how Canines for Warriors helps veterans heal. Well, David, thank you so much for joining the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast. It's an honor to have you here and talking about Canines for Warriors.
Thank you for having me today, Danny. I really appreciate it.
I know that you're an ambassador for the Canines for Warriors program, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. I understand you're joining us from Jersey. Is that where you grew up?
Yes, absolutely. Born and bred. Started out as a Jersey Shore boy and migrated up north recently.
Right on. What was life like growing up in the Jersey Shore?
It was good. When you have the beach 5 minutes from your house, it kind of spoiled a little bit. Lots of things to do. Nature's big here. You can go anywhere from the parks to beaches, just about everything that you could want growing up, you have. And, in the town I grew up in, it was very family oriented. It was family oriented and diverse. So you got a little bit of mix of everything. I grew up with families, where I ate sushi at a young age because my friend's mom was Korean. My mother was Spanish. So you could just grow up and learn a lot of different cultures within my community, which I always, now today looking back, I found very advantageous.
Oh yeah, that really is, growing up amongst a bunch of different cultures. It really helps us prepare for the future and life going forward. I know I spent my childhood in northern Jersey, so a bit different environment than what you grew up in, what you're living in now. And I didn't know too much about the military while I was living there. So what inspired you to eventually join?
So honestly, similar to you, right? I didn't know a lot about the military. I did know at that time we did have a huge base within Monmouth County. My mom was a civilian contractor, so it wasn't like I saw her with uniforms or anything of that nature. From time to time, I would be allowed to go to the base, and I would just remember, I believe it was Armed Forces Day. She would bring us out there, and they would always have static displays or events going on. And then one of those times, I saw someone, air assaulting from a helicopter, which I just thought was amazing. Fort Monmouth being where night vision was invented, I got to play with that and put war paint on. So that was a big part of it. And then obviously just being a kid, watching Navy SEALs or Charlie Sheen or Platoon or any one of those movies that you saw growing up, it just was like, hey, that's what I want to do.
You just bring back so many memories of so many classic films. What was it that then drove you to the Army?
Here's a good inside tip that most people don't know. I was in Naval Junior ROTC in my high school, and my plans were to join the Marine Corps, believe it or not. And I distinctively remember I had asked my brother, which branch should I join? And we really didn't have a good background in military. So he said, who has the best uniforms? I said, the Marines. He said, go with the Marines. And since I was in Navy ROTC, it just kind of gelled. Unfortunately, my mom had got sick when I was in high school. And just to kind of be able to serve my country and still serve my family, that's when I decided to go into the Army and National Guard.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a big responsibility because the National Guard, you're stationed back home.
Yes. And I remember I signed up in high school at 17 years old. I had to get my parents' permission. Either one of them did not want me to join. But they supported. And after I signed, I just remember telling my mom, don't worry about it. We're never going to war. I graduated in June of 2001. In August of 2001, I was in basic training, and we obviously know September 2001. So, you take all these steps to sort of be here for your family and to oblige my mom at her request. And 30 days later, it was like, wow, I lied to you. I'm sorry. So looking back, it's like, wow, you could have never you could have never thought that was going to happen that way.
Absolutely. I mean, to be in boot camp during the 9/11 attacks, that must have really changed the mentality. I mean, obviously you're training to be a war fighter and everybody kind of knows what we're signing up for. Uh, but the reality of it, like you had said, there was no conflict on the horizon. So how did you all adjust to that?
It was, again, like you said, it was peacetime. There wasn't much going on. We already had dealt with Somalia. We had a little bit, the Bosnia and Kosovo missions becoming more of the peacekeeping mission. So again, it was nothing but basic training in peacetime. You'll go to your unit, they'll finish up everything else. 9/11 happened, and you really saw what the military was capable of and what our true mission was, even here at home. I was obviously on an active duty military post, and to see it go from a garrison post to a full combat load, with Humvees and 50 cals and gas masks on, every soldier member, it really lets you know that, hey, this is, you may have come here for college, you may have come here to leave your neighborhood or find a better way of life, but the reality of it is now we're going to war. And I just remember it became very divisive really quickly, because those who truly signed up to volunteer for the armed services, knowing that that day could come, you had those that had signed up again, like I said, for college, and they were like, wait, well, I didn't sign up for this. So you quickly saw people kind of try to get out of the Army, actually. And I mean, they were trying everything possible to get out. So it was a different time. And then the training itself just ramped up completely. I mean, now we're training for war, right? It's not just we're training you to be a soldier. We're training you for war now.
Yeah, the good order and discipline training kind of, I mean, it was still there, but when you're preparing for combat and everything is kind of geared around the mountains of Afghanistan or the deserts of Iraq, it can definitely change your mentality. And so what was your time in service like for you?
For me, you know what? I was young, so I was eager, right? This is what I signed up for, the things I saw growing up. And so I wanted to go defend my country. Being, New York metropolitan area, I took it personally. I mean, obviously the whole country took it personally, but being in this area and having family had worked in the city at that time, I took it extremely personal. And I was ready to go at any moment's notice. And, I got back home, I finished my training, got back home to my home unit, and believe it or not, we were tasked to go to Kosovo. And so I'm just going to myself, why are we going to Kosovo? We have a war, we're already in Afghanistan. We just broke into Iraq. It's time for us to go there. And I want to say we were ramping. It was probably February, March timeframe, and we were ramping up to get ready, doing our all precursors to go prepare for Kosovo. And then we read in a newspaper, someone called me, I read in a newspaper that my unit was going to Iraq, and we had not been notified. So, and this was May of 2004. So we're like, there's no way this is happening. Like someone would have called us. And shortly thereafter, we received the call. And by, I want to say July, the beginning of July, first week of July, end of June of 2004, we were already at Fort Drum doing our training and moving up to get ready to go out. So, a lot of drastic changes, everything, that scope starts to shrink, and you start to be like, okay, this is really real. And so my service started out in conflict. I really didn't have a lot of downtime and peace, even on our home station. We were still doing a lot of the bridges and tunnels and security of critical infrastructure here within the state, because the threat was obviously still real. So it was always, my career started with conflict immediately, but an amazing career nonetheless. I'll tell you, I had the amazing opportunity to serve as a protective service detail, which is by trade, I was a military police officer, but over there I protected the division commander, assistant division commander, and any high value dignitaries and targets, as we consider them, for our side, for coalition forces. And so this gave us, we were in the scope of being in front of, a large audience. These are the people who are commanding division level assets. And for the first time in history, the National Guard was in charge of a division where active duty units have fell underneath of it. And, we were, the task force was Task Force Liberty. So kind of an ode to, hey, this is the New York New Jersey, northeast part of the U.S., taking charge of the north central Iraq and Saddam's whole town of Tikrit, no less, and we're Task Force Liberty. It was like there was no better message to send for Americans that, hey, we're bringing the fight there and we're going to do what, was being asked of us to do. So as a young kid, again, with the job assignment I had, seeing the different facets of government and how things operated, it was intriguing. I wasn't an infantryman. I always tell people I didn't have it the best and I didn't have it the worst. I was kind of right there in the middle. And, but with combat comes combat. And, I would say, fortunately, I got to see combat, and I could go into that later, but it helped me further on in my law enforcement career. But yeah, when you're spraying that first bullet goes by you, or that first bomb goes off, or you see the wreckage and carnage of war, you truly realize, hey, this is not even basic training. This is not even basic training on 9/11. This is a whole different animal. But it prepared me for my life.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds like a very active career. And to your point, being in a combat situation, protecting high value targets like unit commanders is quite stressful. And so how long were you in the military, and what was your transition eventually like?
So I stayed in cumulatively 20 years, right? 6 of those 20 years are active duty time. That's how often I had to go away for the military. And oftentimes people don't realize that, back in the day, it used to be all the nasty guard, the weekend warriors. And then, come these 2 wars, we were getting deployed and going places or being put on state active duty more than anybody else, sometimes more than active duty units. So, transitioning out of Iraq, I came back, assumed a normal MP role and did some trainings, here and there. And it still became a strain on my family. And we were kind of concerned as to, I already had one child at that point, and my second one was on the way, and I was more concerned about being a parent. So I ended up leaving the military for 2 weeks. And then some sergeant majors reached back out to me like, hey, we want you to stay. We don't want to lose you. I did. I jumped right back in 2 weeks later after a break, and I transitioned to being over an Army instructor, which started out teaching this Army instructor school and then finished off teaching at OCS for about 6 years.
Oh, well, and was that up in New Jersey as well?
That's in New Jersey, yep. So every state has the majority of states have the OCS program. And so even we have a regional section, which at that time considered Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland. So that region right there of all those states, we would come together. We do home training, but then we come together for throughout the phases. There's 3 phases, and it's just like your regular OCS. You have 3 different ones. You have your active duty one, you have your reserve component one, accelerated, and then your National Guard duty one.
Oh, wow. I love learning so much about parts of the service that, I was never exposed to. Having an entire career out in Hawaii alongside the Marines, it just wasn't my personal experience. I love learning about experiences like yours. It's so enlightening. Now, while you were serving, one of the things that I always respected about the National Guards is that you guys also had careers outside the military.
Absolutely. So when I came back, or prior to deploying, I worked for a sheriff's office as a 911 dispatcher. Upon coming back, I transferred over to becoming a firefighter, and I did that for about a year and a half. And knowing what I know now, I had that itch for adrenaline, right? At that time, I didn't know what it was. I just know that I wasn't being fulfilled. And going back to what you said, what inspired me to be the military, as a kid, I wanted to be a fireman, a police officer, and a military guy. So as the way I kind of saw it was, hey, you're just following your dream, so do it. So I did that for about a year and a half. And it still wasn't enough. I wanted a higher calling, a greater service, a little bit more action. So I switched over to being a police officer. And I served in patrol for about 7 years before switching over to, it depends on where you're at in the country, but I'd probably say a district attorney's office. And once I switched over to there, I was a county detective state investigator, where I worked in the gang and narcotics unit.
Oh, wow. that need of just service and fulfillment seems pretty high and a strong calling for you.
I think it happens to a lot of us during that transition, right? When you sign up and you raise your hand and you take that oath, and what it truly represents to you to be an American and a volunteer for your country, for armed services, I think that's something that, which makes us the greatest nation in the world, right? I mean, we're an all volunteer force. And to sit here and to leave that, right? You're leaving your teammates, you're leaving your tribe, you're leaving your culture, where everything is about that person to the left and right, front and behind you. And you come out into the civilian world and it's all about me, me, me. You try to look for jobs that are inherently similar, and hence the fire service or the police service or things similar to that nature. So that service, that calling for service, I think that's what kept me in it.
Mm. Now I know for a lot of veterans as well as first responders, there's a lot of different challenges that we face, to include physical and mental health challenges. Was there any point where you stepped up and said, "Hey, there's some things in my life that are a little off, and I need to begin addressing them"?
So believe it or not, looking back, right, hindsight 2020, now I can tell there were signs. Even some of my friends and family may have saw signs, but we weren't educated back then to even talk. We didn't talk about it, right? I fall under the old school rule is, hey, you grab a beer, you don't talk about it, go to the bar, shut it down. That's it. You forget about it. I want to say it wasn't until 2015. And at that point, I had done about an 8 to 9 months undercover stint with this same operation. And the stresses were kind of weighing on me heavily. My mom, sick yet again, but this time it would be terminal. I had that external stress on me, as well as I was getting ready to have my third daughter now. So I was just really, really stressed. And I just remember, I'll never forget, I was standing in my office and I said, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. But I never said it to anyone because I knew that would probably be the end of my career. And I did what I thought was the next best thing, and I opted to try to transfer out of that unit. And unfortunately, that transfer would never come. And so, you take that motto: if you can't beat them, join them. So now you just start pushing more into that fire, which, as we know now, is unhealthy. So one of the things, when you are experiencing mental health issues or concerns, more particularly with PTSD, is you try to occupy your mind with things to take your mind off of the things that hurt you. And so now here I am as a brand new father, or for the third time, a hospice caretaker for my mom, an undercover detective for the county, still being an OCS instructor for the Army. I now went and was working in the police academy as a police academy instructor. And so I would just kept adding more and more to my plate to kind of bury what was happening to me. And I will tell you this, it got to the point, and I shared this probably only about a year and a half ago, and you guys will probably be the third interview or group of people I've ever actually said this to. But it got to the point that, aside from being an undercover detective, we were also on a tactical narcotics team. So we conducted high-risk search warrants on our suspects. And I would get in the van and I'd be all tacked out and blacked out, which is very reminiscent, of what we were doing in Iraq. And I would start to get those flashbacks, and I just said, I'm so tired. I'm over it. And I never had a plan to kill myself, never thought I could kill myself. I could never do that to my kids. But I welcomed being shot and killed in the line of duty. For me, it was peace. It meant that I didn't have to be tormented anymore. It meant that no one had to be wiser to know what was really going on with me. And I would have died a hero's death, and my family would have been taken care of. So to me, that was the answer for it all. And what would eventually end up happening is, all these stresses would just, it would collapse. It would collapse me. It was probably about a year after my mom, or maybe 6 months actually, after my mom had passed. And, with all that tactical scenario that is very reminiscent of military life, mixing that with my mother's death, which is probably about as personal of death as you can get to when you're comparing that with those you served with. I think that was just a recipe for disaster. And that was it. I had what I call my fall from grace. And yeah.
David, thank you for sharing that, being that vulnerable for our audience. I know our personal stories, these journeys that we go on, they serve a higher purpose. They serve the next person that may be walking in our shoes. And you talk about this fall from grace. I remember experiencing mine as a 27-year-old man when I initially asked for help, and they kind of told me what the next steps look like. I remember feeling heartbroken and without guidance. What was your breaking point for you like, and how did you begin putting pieces back together?
Well, when my fall from grace consisted of, I had achieved the whole American dream: marriage, kids, house, cars, vacation. I was living the life. I had my dream jobs, and I lost my house, I lost my marriage, I lost my kids for a certain period of time, and just to rebuild, right? The military and its institution and its indoctrination, the same as the police. We always train for success. No one ever teaches you what to do in failure. No one, right? So you're early. For me, I had to learn this on my own. There was no avenue to really navigate. Any of my friends at this point, no one was talking about suicide. No one was talking about PTSD. No one was talking about mental health. It was always, hey, you'd be put on the rubber gun squad, or hey, you'll lose your job, or you'll get blacklisted. So we went as far to the left as we could from addressing these things. But at this point, I haven't lost the things that I love more than anything, right? And it's one of the key word phrases that I learned during this time was, you can love this job as much as you want and I'll never love you back. And when you realize that, you understand where your focus needs to be, and that's your family. And for me, it was my kids. I wanted to be that father again. I wanted the kids to be able to trust me and grow old with them. And so for me, I knew that I needed to advocate for myself. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I did this by myself. By no means. Did I feel like a man on an island all alone? Absolutely. A man without a country? Absolutely. But I knew for me to truly be where I wanted to be, I had to be 100% vulnerable, and I had to be honest and open with myself. And I knew if I couldn't do that, then I'm cheating myself and lying to myself. So I did that. And with the help of, I had a series of help, right? I had a police trauma counselor. She helped me immensely. I mean, it was someone who, although she never walked a mile in my shoes, she would put herself there. And she really took that time to want to understand and help. And like to this day, I'm so grateful and thankful for her. And I had done the traditional modalities that are thrown down your throat, right? The VA, counseling. Hey, here's your medicine. Okay, you're not sleeping. Here's a pill for that. Oh, here you have upset stomach because of that other pill. Here's another pill. And I did that. And I became a zombie. And that wasn't working for me because that sound still, again, isn't helping me get where I wanted to be for my kids. And at this same time, I was going through these different things. I had a family, and I think this is really important, right? I had a family whose son had passed away in Iraq. Oddly enough, I call it divine intervention. I really do. That's the only way to describe this whole situation. I left Iraq in November 2005. His unit replaced my division in November 2005. I never knew him. I would come home. I would go back into the traditional MP role. My new company commander would end up being his brother. Still, I heard the stories, the rumblings of the stories of what happened to this new commander's brother. But again, we weren't friends. It's nothing you're going to bring up. Fast forward a couple years. I became a police officer. He became a police officer. He went over to teach at the police academy. I went over to teach at the police academy. I went to teach in the military academy. He came to teach in the military academy. Both fathers of 3 daughters. It was just one thing after the next after the next. I grew up in 20 minutes from where he lived in the same county. We both were swimmers that competed against each other and never knew this, So all this keeps coming. So naturally, we became friends, to where I call him brother, and his family is my second family. And his mom and their foundation had reached out and said, "Hey, why don't you try a service dog?" And to me, at that point, I was like, "Okay, well, why not? I've got nothing else to lose. I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. I'm running on fumes." I remember as a kid, I loved having my dog. It gave me inner peace. Why not? Right? Why? And that's truly how it happened. Why not? And I bring it up is talk about selfless service. This family carried their son's legacy, right? They just didn't let the death of their son be that. They started a grassroots foundation in honor of him, in which they support veteran causes of all sorts. But one of their main causes is service dogs. And they were one of the founding, or probably one of the first organizations to help Canines for Warriors. I think they probably contributed close to 100 dogs at this point. So which is huge. And I would go and, go to Canines for Warriors, and what brings us up to today.
David, for those in our audience who may not know, would you mind sharing what Canines for Warriors is and what their mission is?
Absolutely. It's the largest service dog provider in the nation. It's an organization that provides service dogs as a means of therapy for veterans suffering from PTSD, TBI, or military sexual trauma. They use these dogs to help, again, as a therapeutic means to help get veterans and warriors back re-engaging into community and society. It's similar to other different type of alternative therapies. It's just with a dog. The big thing is, again, for me, I wanted to be able to advocate for myself. I wanted to be able to direct my life where I wanted to be. I didn't want a pill or a doctor or someone to tell me where I should be. Right? I knew what happiness was at some point in my life. I just needed to create the map that I wanted to get there. And to each his own, however you get there, right? Whether it's traditional modalities, whether it's equine therapy, whether it's surfing, whether it's scuba diving. For me, the canine just seemed simplistic. And so, I put in this application, and, you go through a series of interviews. You have your paper one that they do, and then you do 2 telephonic interviews. And all the while, what they're doing here is they're just trying to identify your personality with the match the dogs that they have. And, for me, I wanted to be that father could be on the sideline, a soccer field, or at sporting events. I wanted to go to school events if need be. And I'm an avid runner, so I wanted a dog that could do that with me. And so we did that. I go down to Canines, and believe it or not, you're going there to rid yourself of one of the many symptoms of PTSD, but anxiety. But your anxiety goes through the roof, because you're like, wait, what am I doing? And I compare it to that of becoming a father. Like, wow, am I ready for this? It's coming. So you have to be ready no matter, whether you want to be ready or not, you have to be. And so, the first day at Canines, when you get your dog, is just, it's amazing. You can hear it. It's emotional, because you sit here and you're facing the opposite direction of your dog, and you turn around and they walk this dog out to you. Now I'm looking at Doc at this time, and I'm going, this guy's supposed to save my life. And before I could even answer the question, the amount of emotion that was drumming up within my body was just, you couldn't lie, right? There's a picture out there, and it shows him jumping in my lap immediately. And you see my eyes welling up, and I'm going, wow, this might be the first time that I've had true vulnerable emotion in years.
I have a hard time kind of expressing that type of connection when we're first learning how to love on someone or something after recovering. It's a truly unique experience. It's like doing it for the first time. Even though we may have had that experience as younger people or at some point in our life, I know for me, the community that I finally found myself in, and the people that allow me to be as vulnerable as I am, has been life affirming. Is that what the experience was like when you held Doc for the first time in your arms?
Yeah, absolutely. You're introduced to someone, right? I can't say something. You're introduced to someone that is truly going to accept you for who you are, with all your flaws, with all your problems, and they're just gonna love you, right? A dog's demeanor is to serve their, I hate to use the word master, but that's how we put it, is to serve their master, their handler, their provider, and that's just naturally what a dog does. So they're not thinking about how angry you are, what you may have done in your past, what you may look like. They're just there to love you. And naturally, when you're receiving that love, it forces you to give it back, right? It's hard not to. I think the greatest gift that these dogs do is bring back empathy. War and PTSD and just traumas in general could bring about a lot of cynicism and being cynical and negative, and just these dogs diminish that on and day after day after day, when you're sitting here, you got a dog jumping in your lap, licking on you, wants to play with you. After a while, you could have that tough guy. You can be that tough guy and keep fighting it and pushing it, but I don't care who you are, it's going to break you down. It just is, because they bring about such a positive demeanor. Most people who are pet owners, or especially dog owners, just say they like dogs better than they like humans. I mean, I hear it all the time. So it's I always say canines didn't. It's not like they reinvented this wheel of magic. They took something that has been given, has been provided to us, and found a way to just utilize it to help us veterans heal, and heal from the inside out, truly, right? Because that's where it starts. It really has to start with us. We, again, of being vulnerable, we have to be able to accept who we are. So if we're worried about what, John or Jack is, worried about us or thinks of us, we're doing ourselves a disservice. With a dog, you can look at a dog in his eyes and you can sit here and say, hey man, I'm screwed up. And he's going to still look at you the same, and he's not going to change anything. And that allows you, that little bit right there can allow you to go, hey, you know what? I am who I am. I'm imperfect, but I'm happy. I have empathy. I can now be human. I think the biggest and greatest thing Doc does for me, he just allows me to take off that cape. I don't have to be that superhero anymore. I think that's a big thing. We wear our identity of who we were and what we did, and proudly so, and rightfully so. But sometimes to get to that point of healing, you got to just be able to say, hey, I need a break. I gotta take that cape off. I'm no longer a superhero. I just need to be human at this point.
That's beautiful. Now, I did some reading on Canine for Warriors and Doc's story, and it's not just this unilateral exchange of health and well-being that Doc gives to you. What I understand is Doc came from a rescue as well, right?
Yeah, so I want to say 90% of our dogs are rescues. And Doc, like others, he came from a high kill shelter. I want to say he was a puppy, and he was Florida had some type of program with its inmates. But unfortunately, the puppies weren't being kept in safe places. It was cardboard boxes, out exposed to weather conditions. So understanding that they couldn't keep up with the maintenance of the puppies, they decided to send them to kill shelters. Doc was 6 months old when he was put on a kill shelter list. If you could see this dog and know not only my life that he saved, but others that he has saved and made an impact in, it's like, wow. How could something like this almost happen, where he would have been put on, not be here? So canines got Doc at about, I want to say 6 to 8 month point that they got him as a puppy, and I got him around 13 months.
Oh my gosh. Now, you were talking about the interview process that you were being matched with your service dog. Could you share a little bit about Doc's match with you and how he interacts with your community, your family?
Yeah, it's now that is the magic of canines. I will, that's something that they have created and they continue to expand upon. They hit the nail on the head. They really did. Doc's personality and mine, they go hand in hand. I mean, it's just, and I think any warrior from canines would agree with that their dogs are just immediately responsive, and you just feel like they're such a part of you. And this interview process really fine tunes that and really hones in on what you need as a person. And I think that's amazing. And again, started out with a paper, 2 telephonic. They do another one in person just to make sure that, hey, everything they've done over the course of, let's say, anywhere from 12 to 24 months. Obviously, we know there's an unfortunate wait list with that. Um, they try to, and things could have changed during that time too, right? Maybe what you needed in the beginning, 12 months later, you don't need. And so following up with these other type of interviews can help. At the end of the day, yes, it is saving and rescuing dogs, but at the end of the day, it's not just preventing suicide in veterans. It's finding ways to get veterans and service members back into society, back to re-engaging, to having a good affect of themselves, their family, their community, being wholesome and human. That's what life is about. And I think that interview process is, it's just the tip of the spear of how they build to get to the final product.
That's so cool. Now, you mentioned that Doc had an impact on your life and the lives of others. Could you share about those encounters?
Yeah. So again, I got Doc at 13 months. So my daughter might have been at that point maybe a year and a half. So they were similar, and they grew up together, right? And it's funny because she was a toddler, so Doc and her, I considered my toddlers. Now he's 5 years old. Now he's just like my teenagers. So talking how he impacts the family, uh, you know, it's just he's a family member. That's their brother. That's my daughter's brother. My wife, she's a nurse, and even in her stressful days when she comes home from work, immediately I already know what type of day she had, whether she tells me or not, because he's gonna run and jump on her in a certain manner, and that's when I already know, like, okay, hey, she's having a little stressful day, and so he just he uplifts the mood within the house. Now, talking about how he saved others. The first time that I got to witness the power of a service dog outside of me, I was in a local Home Depot, and I had seen this gentleman there several times. And nothing to think, never an indication to know that he was prior service or that he had any type of issues going on. And then one day, he catches me in the back of the store, and he's like, "Hey, um, I see you were in the military." I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Oh, so was I. I was a Marine." I said, "Oh, Semper Fi, thank you for your service." And he starts to get emotional. So I go, okay, and I can understand why. And he drops to one knee and says, "Hey, can I pet your dog?" And you'll see on our dogs, hey, do not pet, and there's reasons for that. And something just told me, like, hey, let me let him pet him, right? And so, and this was early on when I had Doc. So I let the gentleman pet the dog, and he just starts crying. And now I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And he says, I woke up this morning, come to work, but I don't think I was going to make it home. And I just kind of just got this awkward silence, like, what do you mean? But I knew what he meant. That was his last day. In his mind, that was it. There was nothing to go home to. There was nothing to stay alive for. And just to see him confess and be vulnerable with a total stranger, right? Because I was prior service and because I had a service dog, and he was able to just pet Doc and feel that comfort to be able to say, hey, thank you for giving me another day. Thank you for giving me hope. I just, I joke now, but in seriousness, I always say whenever anybody asks to pet Doc, I say yes, because I never want that on my conscience to know that could be the difference of someone taking their own life or having hope for just another day. And then, so that was early on in having Doc. And more recently in January, we were at a convention out in Las Vegas where Canines was a part of. And I was going into the bathroom, and I think I had my Canines shirt on. And there was a gentleman who had a military style baseball cap. And he looked at me and gave me that 1,000-yard stare. Now, anyone who's ever been around someone from combat or service, you've seen that 1,000-yard stare, and you immediately know what that is. And he gave me this stare because, I mean, what other stare would you get from, in a men's bathroom it's just, it's just awkward. We don't do that. And I quickly knew what it was, but I had to go to the bathroom. So I was like, hey, I can't talk right now. So I come out and this gentleman is sitting outside the restroom and he's waiting. He's like, hey, is that your service dog? And I said, yeah. He's like, what do you do? And I advised who I was and what I did. And he just goes into this story. And you could just see this weight that he has sitting on his chest. And I said, well, the dogs do this for us. The dogs do that. I said, would you like to pet him? He's like, sure. So I tell Doc, give Doc the command, make a friend. And Doc now, takes his break from being a service dog and gets to be a pup. And this guy just starts rubbing him and petting him. He goes, I live alone. I don't think I deserve a service dog. I never saw combat. I think it's embarrassing why I have PTSD. And I was like, well, hey, there's no right or wrong as to having PTSD. I said, if you don't mind me asking, what did you do? He's like, oh, I was mortuary affairs. And just right there, that just was enough for me to fully understand the scope of what he was dealing with. And I said, oh, man, that's a heavy job to have. Like, you don't need to be in combat to experience PTSD. And so he's still petting the dog. And he's like, yeah, I live alone. I'm lost in life. I'm out of the Air Force. And, I have elderly neighbors. And if it weren't for them checking on me, I would have been going already. And now I'm just sitting here and I'm going, whoa, just stop. My other warrior that were with me, we exchanged numbers with him. We gave him the website to go, find where to get a service dog. And he left there at least with some hope, right? To this day, I do know, in fact, he did go and apply and he is on the wait list for a service dog. So that is just enough to break that ideology from a veteran who thinks that, hey, all hope is lost, that they're alone. That one moment in these two situations changed two veterans' lives. Two strangers on two opposite sides of the country. It works. I mean, there are naysayers, but this is proof. And I'm just one warrior. How many warriors get to experience this?
Man, that's beautiful, David. The service dog sound amazing. I love the work that Canines for Warriors is doing. I know that there's always a long wait for things like this. Part of the show of what we do is share these resources, make sure that people know that there are things available to them. There are alternatives to therapy than other than being a zombie on medications. There are communities out there. There are people like you that are looking to give other people an opportunity to better their lives. And so for those looking for, say, Canines for Warriors, where can they go to find out more information and potentially even apply or support the organization?
So yeah, to your credit, unfortunately, with all good things, right, there are weights or the supply demand issue. And again, Canines for Warriors is a non-for-profit, so everything that they do to run their organization is based totally and solely off of donations. To date, we've saved over 2,000 dogs. We've saved over 800 veterans. And I like to put out this, we can't look away from the number that sadly, unfortunately, suicide still and may happen. But of the over 800 warriors that we've graduated, to my knowledge, only one, unfortunately, has still committed suicide. So when I look at those numbers, right, the return of your investment, if we had to look at something like this, there's nothing greater than that. I think 92%, or forgive me, I think it's about 90% on average of veterans are no longer on medication. And when we look at that now allows that veteran to go and be who they want to be. So I definitely wanted to put that out there. But a simple Google of Canines for Warriors, it'll pop up. It's matriculating out there. Our emblem is out there. Our mission is out there. And we're, can never get out there enough, right? There's no such thing as too much of a resource for veterans. There's never enough. right? There's millions and millions of veterans, and we're not just only talking about the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. We have veterans going all the way back to Vietnam that, things weren't addressed the right way, and the care and the resources for them. And, we've even opened up to now that, for a certain period of time, in the beginning, it was the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, but there's a need. And, Canines for Warriors is doing their best to address that need, and a lot of other service dog organizations. I'm just, obviously particularly proud of my organization that I call my family. And I say this because, I look at them no longer as just a service dog organization. Personally, I view them as a veteran service organization. They just don't give you a dog and say, hey, here you go, good luck. Right? There's a lot of different things that consider them a wraparound service where they're doing quarterly check-in with their warrior graduates. Those that are on a wait list, they're doing check-ins with them. I love bragging about these 2 points. To K9's credit, when the war in Ukraine broke out, they were one of the first, if not the first, to reach out to all of its warriors and say, hey, we understand that you aren't a part of this, but this is a war nonetheless. And that inherently, as service members who want to be there for the underdog, this may bring about these type of feelings in you. And they go through all the signs and symptoms of PTSD yet again and remind people you're not alone. And here are your resources. Even though you have a service dog, doesn't mean it's going to abate everything that you may have. To do that, to me, that was like, wow. But even more so during the Afghanistan evacuation, they put this same style memo out before our Joint Chiefs of Staff addressed the entire military. Their foresight to see what could come from that, to me, that's just, these are people who truly care. And that made me feel so proud to be part of their organization. And if there's a need that you have as a veteran, as a warrior of theirs, if they can't meet it, they'll find that resource to help you, fix that need. And that's the beauty of canines. I can't speak to that for others. I'm not saying they don't do that, but that is what makes canines for warriors. They are truly about the veteran and saving lives and saving the lives of both a veteran and a dog. I mean, if anyone has ever had the opportunity to truly save a life, it is the most empowering thing you could ever experience in life. And, me personally having the opportunity to save multiple lives over the span of, 20 years throughout several careers, I never take those opportunities for granted. It's an amazing thing. And that's one reason why I'll continue to sing praises for Canines for Warriors and be an ambassador for them for as long as they'll have me.
Right on. Well, hopefully they'll continue to have you there being an ambassador. You have an amazing story. And before I let you go, I just want to ask one last question. And that's, do you have any advice for somebody that's currently struggling?
The best thing, like anything else in the military, coming through the ranks, is you have to take your career, take charge of your career, what you want. That's the same thing for your mental health. You have to take charge of it. The best advocacy is self-advocacy. You do what you want for your life. And don't let anyone dictate. We're now in a space in which the stigma, although may be there in certain things, it is getting diminished. It is becoming a little bit more of a palatable topic to talk about. We talk about amongst special operations. We talk about military services. It's now making its way over to the fire and police. And so, nothing's sitting here saying, hey, you have to go out here and grandstand your vulnerabilities and tell the world what's going on with you. That is definitely not what I'm saying. But be able to speak to yourself, be vulnerable amongst yourself and say, hey, it's okay to not be okay. Right? It's okay to be human. We don't have to be these robots, these machines, these superheroes. It's time to put the human before the equipment. And we really have to do that. And one reason I would suggest or, put that out there for canines, if you want to break from life, if you want to take a chance to just get ahead and you're not sure that the dog is perfect for you, give it a shot. Because at this point, what do you have to lose? You're not going to get, there's no addictiveness unless you just want to be addicted to being happy and in a good mood. There's no side effect unless you're allergic to dogs, and they've figured out that answer because they have hypoallergenic dogs. So it really is an opportunity to escape the life that you're living in, that torment. You'll go and spend 3 weeks on campus with like-minded individuals, with your tribe again, and where you're seeing the beauty of human beings truly taking care of and appreciating the service that you've given to this country. If that sounds amazing to you, like you want to do a Club Med, a full expense paid, and get a dog out of it, Canines for Warriors. I mean, and for those listening, the BAQ or the housing style that they put us in, it's comparable to Air Force officers. So it's some superb rather quality living for 3 weeks, for 21 days. It's just amazing. And I recently learned that Canines for Warriors is even going above and beyond to try to take care of family members and caretakers and children to the best of their abilities while these warriors are away at this 21-day program.
That's incredible. David, thank you so much for sharing your journey, the work that Canines for Warriors is doing, and the work that you're doing to help our veteran community. I really appreciated you coming on the 1 Mile 1 Veteran podcast.
Definitely my privilege and honor. Thank you for having me.